job to. We were sensitive to the fact that one of the candidates had been offered another job. That individual was in the deliberation. We were discussing that third candidate.
I guess my point is that it didn't need to be done the day before the vote. Right?
If I could make one comment, and I think if you look at the past 3 years' budgets for the school districts, we've had some cuts, we've had some issues at the elementary school level where we had a great deal of parent upheaval, for lack of a better term, where they were not happy with the school board because we cut the assistant principal, and we cut some of the guidance issues. So I certainly don't want the people here tonight or the people who may be reading the articles or something to think that because of this one issue, the school board hasn't made cuts. I think the last 2 or 3 years we have had a zero budget, if not a negative budget, compared to the previous year. So I think the school board is conscious of the economy, and the school board is conscious that people have taxes to pay. We're all taxpayers ourselves. So I think to look at this one individual issue and narrow it down, that the school board doesn't care, or the school board doesn't cut budgets, or the school board doesn't do anything, that we just do what we want with the taxpayers' money, may not be fair. Again, please go back and look at the previous budgets. We've been supported by the budget committee over the last 3 or 4 years and have brought in what I feel are some very good budgets. So I just want to make that point that although this one issue is certainly creating quite a bit of excitement in the town, please look at the picture as a whole and not narrow it down to this one issue and say that the school board doesn't care and the school board doesn't cut budgets, because I believe we certainly do.
I believe you do too, but also the student enrollment is definitely going down. So we have to make cuts.
And because of the student enrollment and the advice of Dr. Domenico, that's why we looked at some of those things at the elementary school level, and we'll continue to look at that in the budget in the future.
Thank you.
And we need a qualified, experienced superintendent to advise us how to best reduce positions while maintaining a quality education for our children.
Peter Sawyer, 35 Saltmarsh Pond Road. I'm also the assistant principal at the high school. I just didn't want to leave tonight without giving you a little insider's view on. I get nervous when we talk about the superintendent as just administrator or bean counter or somebody who negotiates contracts and cuts budgets or raises budgets. He is the educational leader of the district. The 3 principals have a very difficult job to do, and neither one of them are experts in each other's buildings. Ken is not an expert at what goes on in elementary school ed. We have a superintendent because we feel that he or she does fit that bill. They are the expert K through 12. And without that overlooking global picture, the district is not going to move forward. We're just going to run in the same circles over and over again. So I just wanted to make sure that Paul and Ken coming in, they are the educational leaders of the school, not just superintendents, administrators. I don't know what I would do without Paul. I guess I'll find out. Ken will fill his shoes, I'm sure he will, but that's just all I have to say.
Thank you. Sure, before you speak, there's a woman that sat down who had a walking aid with her, and I didn't know if she might like to.
Oh, go ahead.
Still trying to speak.
You go right ahead.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Skip Murphy, 9 Guilford Glen Road in Guilford. And I, along with a lot of other folks, wish to say thank you to Paul as his request, not Dr. Domenico, but Paul. Thank you very much for your service. One time.
It's always Dr. Domenico's Paul.
I am certainly one who is in favor of the petition warrant article number 4 that was presented by and voted upon by the town folk here on a 2-to-1 margin. They're overwhelmingly approved to go back to the 98 plan and put in that management structure. But let's be clear. Once again, we find ourselves arguing about money. Even though I am a member of the budget committee, I am speaking as an individual at this point. We have been talking about the budgets, and I would like to make a correction that Paul brought up, in that this past year, your budget rise was 3 times the rate of inflation. where most families barely met the rate of inflation or were much less because of the economy. And Mr. Weber, you said a number of occasions that the town approved of your management structure by passing the budgets. I will bring up as a reminder that 2 out of 3 years, in one span of time, we rejected the school board budget for various reasons. But again, it's always about the money, and it's also about the performance, because once again, we see the schools in somewhat disrepair in terms of schools in the technical term, Paul.
In need of improvement.
Thank you.
Sorry.
In need of improvement. And partly, and this may sound like a little bit of a dig, but the question comes up, can we continue to be doing so poorly, but perhaps a little bit cheaper? And I look at one of the things I have brought up for the last several years is the direct versus indirect cost, that ratio of those who are actually teaching our students versus the overhead number of people providing that support. And I'm looking at last year's budget, and I'm looking at the total cost by employee, $172,000, $133,000, $129,000, $121,000, $105,000, $127,000, $107,000, $119,000, $114,000, $105,000, $109,000, for a total of $1.343 million for only 11 employees. We have basically a budget that is spending $20,000 per student. The New Hampshire average is more around $12,000. The national average is approximately $9,000. When I look at the scores that Guilford is bringing in, while they may be above the state average, they are barely above the state average. And it also depends on which school you look at, be it the elementary, the middle, or the high school. So the question comes up, are we indeed getting the bang for the buck that we're spending? And I would like to submit that we're not. And that's one reason why we are here, because it is very difficult to cut the budget. Because as I mentioned before, when the budgets were rejected by the town, I noticed one thing, that the default budgets grew larger than the proposed budget. So it's a Hobbesian choice by the voters. Do we reject the current budget and go back to the default one and cost ourselves more? Or just simply approve the budget that's being put forth? I do have one question for the council. And I think I may be asking the same question that was asked previously, but I wish to ask it in a different way. I will agree that whatever bottom line number is given in the budget, the school board is allowed to move that money around to any line item that exists any way that they want. Is that correct?
Yes.
So by any petition warrant that cuts anything or adds anything, the board can either move money around to replace that function or decide not to spend that money. Is that correct?
With the petition article?
With the petition warrant article, say the town puts...
Money that's raised under a petition article can only be expended for the purpose of the petition article.
Okay, but is it necessary for the board, because you said earlier that the school board is a power unto itself, are they required to spend that money for that kind of petition warrant that adds money to the budget?
No.
And if the citizens decide to vote for a petition warrant that cuts the money from the budget, the board is able to move monies around so as to continue the functions that were originally cut by lowering that budget.
Right.
So in effect, they are a monarchy. They are absolutely non-accountable during that time period that they are elected.
We're elected officials.
During the time that you are elected, they are able to do whatever they want regardless of what petition warrants are voted upon. Was that a correct and effective summary of what you have said earlier?
No.
Because you have said basically petition warrants are now advisory.
Those are your words, sir.
Well, I'm trying to interpret them the way that I have listened all night. That's one reason why I decided to sit and listen rather than getting up first thing. In essence, what I get from this meeting is that regardless of what the citizens have done by their votes, the school board does not have to abide by the intent or the spirit of that petition warrant. They can be removed in an election for their particular seats. But while they are seated on that board, they can do pretty much whatever they would like to do.
No, there are restrictions, and I think we discussed those. If there are petition warrant articles, the money can only be spent for the purpose that the money is raised for.
But you said that they don't have to spend it.
I'm trying to answer your question.
All right.
I'm not going to have you put words in my mouth. Those are your conclusions. I'm indicating what the law is with respect to the expenditure of funds. And as you know, being a member of the Budget Committee, petition warrant articles that raise money can only be spent for that purpose.
Correct.
It is not a requirement that the board expend the money for that purpose. And they don't have to. And if the body cuts money from a particular purpose, as I mentioned under the Ashley v. Rye case, the board has the authority to make a determination as the governing body of the district that it's a priority to expend money for that purpose.
Agreed, and I have said the exact same thing using shorter words. In essence, you've just agreed with me.
Just if you could wind up a little bit so that we can get another person.
Absolutely, I will come back on the second time.
Thank you.
I hate to make one comment. Skip, I think you said that the cost per student is $20,000. I think, Scott, that number is a little bit different. Is it not around 16? 15.7. I just want to make sure when you compare the way, I think, Scott, we had a discussion at one of the board meetings about how how that formula works, and some things are pulled out and some things aren't. So I just wanted to make sure that for the record, that if you're going to compare us to the state average and other things, there's a certain formula that is used for that.
Okay. I did it the simple way. I looked at all of the monies that have to be expended, approximately $24 million this year.
Yes, sir.
Wherever that source of revenue is coming from, because when it all comes down to it, it's coming from taxpayers, regardless of the source,
right,
be it federal, state, what have you. And I look at the enrollment of about 1,230 odd students. The simple math comes out to be about $20,000 per student. That's what we are spending.
And I'm not disputing that statement. I'm disputing when you start to compare it to the state average. The state average is built on a formula that takes out certain building aid items, and Scott, you can certainly speak to this better. If you're going to do that for Guilford, then you need to make sure you're using the same formula for the rest of the other districts or the rest of the states. That's all I'm saying. You can't use a certain formula for Guilford and let the state formula sit for the other districts.
Are you willing to concede that we spend much more than other districts our size, comparatively?
I'm willing to concede that we spend the budget that the taxpayers allow us to spend.
Oh, well, if you're going to go to the nuances, at least grant me the privilege.
Again, I'm talking about your formulas. You can't use a formula in one instance and then change the formula to use a different number. Let's use the same formula and let's compare.
Well, I guess that will have to be a chart to be created then. Thank you.
Thank you. Pam?
Hi. My name's Ellen McClung. I live at 271 Belknap Mountain Road.
Say it again, please.
My name's Ellen McClung. I live at 271 Belknap Mountain Road. I think that, for example, scores. Scores are a shortcut. As a former tutor in GRE, the test of English is to speakers of other languages, SATs, and this and that. Scores are only one little piece of the puzzle, you know, when it comes to determining what a student has learned. And most educators know that. I don't have kids in school. The thing I ask of the Guilford services that I vote for is that in this day and age, people will have to be educated and qualified for their jobs, and that the people who are doing the school stuff are people who are educated in school stuff and passionate about it. The people that are doing things like the fire department are educated in it and passionate about it, and then I'll pay the taxes. It's about that simple. And I think those people are people that we should listen to. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I see some repeat speakers. Is there anybody here tonight that wants to speak for the first time before we begin what appears to be a second round? We all set? Okay, sir, please.
Thank you. Do I just say my name again?
It would help, sure.
Okay. David Horvath, 28 Timber Lane, Guilford. I needed to correct a couple of things, and I appreciate the indulgence, because we've gotten into the weeds and away from the point of what we're here for tonight on a lot of different things. But I do want to point out one thing. The cost per student that Mr. Blanford referenced was presented by Mr. Isabel at a school board meeting a month or so ago. And that was in reference to two-year-old data, not to the current data. And at that point in time, he refused to speculate on what this budget or even the current year would yield in terms of cost per student, in terms of the formula you're referring to, Paul. So that number is 2 years old, that 15,000, 16,000. Second thing,
Can I make a comment back?
Sure.
As is Skip's number averaging to the state. So all I'm asking for is, let's use the same formula to be fair across the board, that's all.
And if I can also add, the reason that Scott could not provide numbers for the current year is because the formula does not allow you to calculate the numbers until the school year is over.
I understand that.
That's the way it is, and you have to be comparing apples and apples. So if you want to compare our cost per pupil to other cost per, or the cost per pupil for other school districts, you have to be using the same formula, and that formula cannot be applied until the school year is completed.
Fine. What was our cost 2 years ago compared to the state, to the national average?
That was in Scott's presentation at the second,
No, it wasn't.
School board meeting.
Anyway, going on another comment.
I didn't hear what your last comment was, I'm sorry. I didn't hear the last comment that you made.
I just said that I was going to go on to the next item.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the comment, that's all.
I stepped away from the mic, I'm sorry, Paul. The other thing, again, this is in the weeds, but from the time that we broke away from Guilford, our budget was around the $11 million mark. It's now over $24 million. It's increased $1 million a year on average, while our student population has dropped 333 kids. Paul, you also had made a statement about lean budget, even compared to last year. Over time, the average is high. It's gone up about $1 million a year. So I just wanted to correct those things and get that on the record. Anyway, back to getting out of the weeds and to the purpose of being here tonight. One of the questions that I didn't have the opportunity to ask the first time around, going back to 1997, 1998, when we withdrew, put a plan together by our people. There was a way forward. The board chose not to, okay? But I still haven't seen a decision was made, but I haven't seen where you even gave the other plan a chance. Was it ever studied?
Yes.
Yes,
it's in the report of the SAU Transition Committee, and they talk about how they looked at the proposed management plan from the SAU Planning Committee, and one of the parts of that plan was to have the town handle the school financial matters. Okay, when the SAU Transition Committee looked at that in more detail, it was determined that the town was not prepared to do that. So right there, that was a major difference, a major reason why the proposal from the SAU Planning Committee was not accepted. And if you look at the minutes of the SAU Transition Committee, you can see where that's discussed.
Well, I'm hoping you'll enlighten us there, because I want to understand what authority the Transitional Planning Committee had that superseded the SAU Planning Committee. How did that come about? Who gave that authorization?
That was a committee that was created by the school board at the time.
Okay, you created it, but how did it come about? I mean, did you take that before the townsfolk for a vote,
The school
or how?
board itself created the subcommittee.
And ignored the transition planning, or excuse me,
Absolutely not.
the SAU planning committee?
No.
Okay, I'm just asking, I'm trying to understand this, that's why we're here tonight, for you to give us the
Absolutely not.
information.
What they did is, that was the next step. Planning board committee's report was passed on to the transition committee. They moved forward from that point, analyzing it, making decisions on the 3 points I pointed out before. Personnel, the budget, and a location. So that transition committee is the next step in the planning committee.
And where is that in state law that says that that is a legal authority? I'm just trying to
It was
understand.
a subcommittee created by the school board at that time.
Okay, but none of the RSAs specifically address that type of a
I couldn't
thing?
answer that.
We
What about
made it
you?
clear all night long that by state law, the school board is responsible for determining how the school district is going to be administered. So this was all in accordance with the school board's role to determine the best management structure to administer the school district. So it comes directly from that.
Correct. Okay, and the last question I would have is, in that time when you decided to go forward with the superintendent as opposed to what was proposed, what was the structure at that point in time? How many people as compared to the people we currently have, the salaries we currently have?
At that time,
I shouldn't say the salaries, I'm not asking you to go back over the salaries. I'm looking at the
I can just
structure.
tell you the makeup of the
That's-
office, if you don't mind. It was a superintendent, a business administrative secretary, a bookkeeper, and the recommendation came forward from the transition committee for a full-time receptionist/secretary, but the school board decided to make that to a half-time position.
So 4.5 people.
Correct.
Okay, now with 333 students less, how do you justify the public
Again,
instruction?
Dave, I do not have the enrollment count from 1998 in front of me.
Would you trust me on that? I do.
Again,
It's
I
1559.
don't have the figures.
1,559 was the number. And what's projected next year is 1,228. That may have changed slightly, but that was the number, the last number that I had. But I'm trying to understand if you're doing the will of the people, managing both the education side of things and the money side, and being responsive to the will of the people, taxpayers, education, doing both jobs, how do you justify such a top-heavy structure now with less students?
Well, again, I will state to you that every time the school board puts together their budget for the coming year, we look at everything. We look at the current staffing in all 3 schools and at the SAU. Everything is looked at. Budgets are brought forward to the school board. They start from the bottom up. They start from the individual classroom teachers looking for what their needs are. It's brought to a principal. The principals from the 3 schools are meeting with the superintendent. That budget is gone over with a fine-tooth comb. I can tell you the superintendent and probably others are making cuts, and I know for a fact they are, long before it ever gets to the school board. When the school board has the opportunity to look at that budget, they're making cuts as well. So yes, we hear you, enrollment is going down. Enrollment can change. Every year, enrollment changes. We look at all those things when we actually finalize our budget. And we're not the final eyes on that budget. Our budget, as you well know, because you sit on the budget committee, goes before the budget committee. 2 seconds.
Okay.
It goes to the budget committee. The budget committee obviously has the opportunity to discuss that budget, make recommendations. It ends up being voted on a preliminary budget by the budget committee. It then goes to the community, to our voters. At the deliberative session, everyone sitting in that audience has the opportunity to ask questions at the public hearing, and then at the deliberative session, the second part, they get to make any changes that they would like to see happen. It goes back to the budget committee. They take a vote. The school board takes a second vote as to whether or not we're going to move forward with the budget committee's recommendation. And ultimately, the final say is the voters. So I stress to you, the board looks at all those issues you're raising tonight.
Thank you. I do want to say the same thing that Mr. Murphy said, is I'm here as a private citizen tonight. As Mr. Weber knows, we all wear multiple hard hats, but I'm here as a private citizen tonight. But, you know, you did say one thing at the very end, so that at the very end, it's up to the voters. It's up to the voters when you want it to be up to the voters, and that's why we're here tonight.
John, can I
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Just one comment on the increase of the budget, and certainly that's a concern. You have to understand, in that time span, there's been many more federal requirements for special ed that we are required to do. It's not the same school that was 13 years ago. And as is in any business, there are increased costs for qualified personnel, for salary. There's also the negotiated contract with the teachers that the taxpayers vote on. So I understand your numbers, and certainly the numbers are a concern, but to give a little explanation as to why those numbers continue.
I just wanted to point out that Paul, you said it was a flat line, or even from year to year, or essentially.
No, I said
and I wanted to point out.
I said not this year, but the previous 2 years' budget. If you look at those budgets, I think the school board made great effort, even to the point of saying that there was many parents that were upset with the school board because of some of the cuts that we were making at the elementary school level. I was saying don't look at it as to this one issue, that the board has been responsible in making some cuts and looking at all the areas that we should try to save some money.
And one other thing that's happened since 1998 is we built a new school. We went from a 2-school district to a 3-school district.
But we also have less students now than we had then.
And
we perhaps don't need as much space.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sir.
Kevin Leandro, Gunstock Hill Road. The point of this meeting, at your last monthly school board meeting, when you decided to hold a public hearing in lieu of, which we've still reserved the right to have our district meeting, we did ask for an action. The action is not necessarily a vote. But we asked for rock solid legal reasoning for ignoring the vote. I talked to you explicitly, and I said, you know, what we want is a reading of the law. Time and time again, we've heard you say, and we've heard it by your lawyer, we've heard it by you. Just a few minutes ago, while talking to Dave, you said the state law gives that authority to the school board to determine the administrative structure of the district. I mean, do you argue with that? That's what you said. And from the start, I said, well, I would like to see the reading of the law. I've heard opinions from your legal counsel. I mean, the long and the short of it is the reason why we're here tonight, the reason for our petition for a special district meeting is because we're trying to avoid litigation. And if you could give me rock solid evidence that we're wrong, I'll shut up.
I don't know how he could make it any clearer, but if you...
He hasn't... Okay, can I...
He has cited Supreme Court cases...
From 1958... From 1958, he didn't cite the law from 1997 that just prescribes the procedure. In 1997, we were not a single district SAU. We weren't a SAU. This was when you form an SAU, and the state, the plan was submitted to the state. That's everybody knows that. The state accepted it. The voters accepted it. Okay. Now you redid the plan. Where's the acceptance letter from the state? Did the state approve your new plan? According to Miss Allen, I'm sorry, Miss Sue, it was never submitted, it was never approved by the state. She's been forced to retract her statement before that the plan, including the superintendent position, was February 7th, school board meeting. Ms. Allen made the statement, given background, that a plan with the superintendent position included was submitted to the state and voters and it was approved. And then a second plan was brought to the school board, not included. That was not the case. She's since graciously admitted that she misspoke, in that the only plan that's ever been submitted and approved did not include a superintendent position. And that's where we are today. We don't have, there is provisions in the law, RSA 194, for reorganization. If you want to reorganize, we have to start the whole process 194C over again.
Can you take a breath? Because we got a response or two here.
I guess the reorganization was the withdrawal of Guilford School District from Laconia, from the withdrawal of SAU 73 and the creation of a single district SAU, Guilford. You have an area agreement with Gilmanton for the education of your high school students. That has nothing to do with the SAU structure and the way that's done. Right. The Guilford School Board operates the Guilford SAU, and they're one and the same. They're not separate. Since it's not a multi-district SAU, maybe this is part of your confusion. Excuse me, let me finish. Since it's not a multi-district SAU, there is not a separate legal entity that is the SAU that's under a